homestead. I am outside on my back porch right now, and we're going to do some seed starting. So I have got a number of trays. I've got a greenhouse inside that you'll see later in the video. It's got 4 shelves. So I've got one tray for each of those 4 shelves, and you'll be amazed at how many plants you can fit in here. I've got my garden plan. So I've spent a couple days kind of going through the plants that I'm going to be growing this year. Cut a lot out from last year. The only brassicas I'm really going to be growing this year are kale, because I ate a lot of kale. The other ones didn't grow too well. We're 90% sure it's because the soil had never been amended by the previous owners, and there's a ton of shade caused by a lot of trees that we have since cut down. But not knowing it completely yet if the amended soil and increased sun is going to be enough to make a difference, I'm going to focus solely on items like peppers, tomatoes, beans, and things that I know I want a lot of for canning, making salsas, making tomato sauces. So primarily, honestly, my garden's going to probably be a wide range of tomatoes, wide range of peppers, hot peppers for hot sauce, and a whole lot of beans, lettuce, greens, herbs, lots of herbs, medicinal and culinary herbs. So what do we need to get started? I've got these little trays here, and these are little greenhouses. They don't come with the soil pods because I'm pretty picky about the soil I use. But it's got these little trays here so you can pull them apart if you want to, so you can kind of plant your seeds by group, because they all pop apart if you want. But there's also holes in the bottom, because I find that watering from the bottom gets the roots to go down deeper faster, as well it prevents water from settling on the top. And I've numerous years had problems with mold starting on the top of my seeds. Now, if you are having a problem with mold growing on top of your seeds, there's a couple ways you can go about fixing this. One that I actually just learned about this year is putting a thin layer of vermiculite across the top. So it helps stabilize the moisture, it keeps the moisture in, but also doesn't let it pool on top. It helps keep that a little bit more controlled. The option I've chose to use is I actually have one of those small USB desk fans that you can get that are only about yay big, and I actually have that hooked up in my greenhouse. So there's a little hole cut in the greenhouse that the wire goes out of, and I've got that just kind of sitting right at the top of my greenhouse, and it just blows the air down the front kind of away from the seedlings, so I'll push them further away, and it just keeps the airflow so I don't have a ton of condensation build up in the greenhouse. You'll see the setup later in this shot, and I'll show you how I also use some blankets to make sure that it keeps the light in the greenhouse too. So on top of these, we've also got the tray that they sit in the bottom, so you can fill that with water. But there's also these clear tops. So because I grow in a little greenhouse, I don't actually use these tops. But what I will be doing is I have another one of these trays that's extra. So I might actually put these in that tray and save one of these like this, and put all my herbs in one of these, just in the front window of my house, kind of in the dining room area, because the herbs will grow really easy for me, and I'm not too concerned about having such a controlled climate for them. So I'm thinking that even some of the flowers and the herbs, I'm going to just fill this with soil, plant them down, put some tags identifying them, and just let them sit in this. Another thing you're going to need, really important thing, is good soil. So yeah, you could go in your backyard and dig up some soil, and I used to do that where I used to live, just kind of grab some soil from the back. But the soil we had in the back was actually gardening soil that we had brought in from a local landscaping company. So it wasn't a seed starting soil, but it was a growing soil. It wasn't just soil right from the ground, because where I am, it's you've either got clay or you've got sand. I got a ton of sand that then turns to clay. So strawberries that I'm going to be growing will be really happy. Other things, not so much. So what I like to use is either the Miracle-Gro seed starting, which is a great one that I have my peppers starting in right now, because I couldn't get a hold of this when I started my peppers. And it works pretty well, just it's a little bit, if you want to be more cost effective, grabbing this big cube here, nicer soil, organic soil. Also, for how many years this is going to cover me for seed starting, more bang for your buck when you buy something like this. I think this was $45 at a local seed store called Cleary Feed and Seed. Other thing you're going to need, seeds. So I've kind of got my seeds grouped together. For example, this is a little Ziploc bag of, quote, cottage garden. So my husband wants to get rid of even more of our lawn, so he doesn't have to mow as much. So pretty much the whole front corner of my property is going to become a cottage garden. I'm not going to do some fancy layout planning or anything like that. I'm just going to make sure that stuff I'm kind of planting around each other works well together. Something's not going to pull from the other thing or choke out another plant. and we're gonna just kind of sow some seeds. Some of them I'm gonna have to start ahead of time, like these Chinese lanterns, and then just kind of let them do their thing, with the exception of the Chinese lanterns, because those things spread like crazy, so those might have to be micromanaged, like my mint. Last item is our garden plan. So I actually went through, planned everything out like I mentioned, and then I divvied everything up that I needed to grow into little sections here on the tray. So I know that these trays are 12 by 6 for cells, and I want to have a couple extra plants in case some fail to grow or don't transplant well or don't survive the hardening off, and make a couple extra bucks selling some seedlings once they're good and happy and I have extra plants. So I pre-planned what's going where, so I know a row of this, a row of that, and I can go through, and sometimes I'll have them mixed where across the bottom I might have some herbs and seeds. And even though I have this plan, I will still also have tags that I will write the names on, plop them in, and then that way I can't accidentally mix anything up. Because somehow last year I managed to mix up my zucchini and butternut squash, which I still to this day don't know how I did. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do, I got my gloves on here, I've got my tray. I don't have the little clear piece with it or anything like that, but I'm gonna go ahead and grab some soil and we're gonna just basically sprinkle it on our seedlings. What I'm also doing while I'm filling this up, as you'll notice, because this isn't such a compact box, is I will actually kind of rub it through my hands to try and loosen it up. Another thing you can do is you can actually dump some of this in a large container and mix it up by hand. You could add additional compost if you really want to, or fertilizer. I've usually just started with the seed starting soil and been successful with that. And some people will also add a little bit of water to it so it's a little bit pre-moistened. Again, I'm more about the quick and lazy way. And I'm just smoothing it around with my hands here, making sure nothing's getting too full. But we're going to give it a good shake to have everything settled too. We want to make sure we don't have any big chunks like that. And you don't want to pack this down just yet. Okay, now we've pretty much got it kind of all across. Got my fingers across here. Then what you want to do is you want to grab this and kind of just give her a little tap. And what that does is, it was originally filled to the top, it gives us a little bit of space on top of a lot of these pods here. Now these ones that are really full, I might actually take a little bit of that out. Because you don't want them too full, because you're going to put another layer of soil over top of them once you're done. There we go. So now we are good to start seeding. So I've got my plan out right here. My cousin is probably watching this video laughing at me and my plan and my notes and everything, where she just wings it. And power to you people that can wing it, but my brain will just not let me wing it. So my favorite thing to eat is tomatoes, and I get super excited about tomatoes every year because I can't eat red tomatoes without my mouth hurting. And that's all you can find in the stores without paying $5 to $10 for the fancy little yellow tomatoes. So when I grow tomatoes, I grow a rainbow of tomatoes. My husband only likes red tomatoes, so I've got regular red tomatoes, which I think this year I've got some Kellogg's, yeah, we're growing Kellogg's as big red tomatoes, but I also got some early Siberians for him so we can get some tomatoes that are a little bit earlier in the season because he loves the fresh red ones. And then I've got pink, orange, yellow, green, white, and a variety of also cherry tomatoes as well. So let's start a tray with the tomatoes because that's the one I know I'm going to be looking forward to the most. Okay, so I got my little pack here. So I kind of, when I go through and I start planting, I'll pull out all the seeds that I like and then put them in little groups. So all of these guys are going to be one row in the garden. So I've got some of the herbs that are going to be in there, but I've also got herb. All my different tomatoes. So you'll notice I have white envelopes and orange envelopes. These orange envelopes are seeds from my cousin. If you guys don't know, my cousin is Connerty Meadow Farms, Ricky over there. So I harangle her for seeds every year, as well as she has an abundance. I see if I can get some from her because the seeds have always grown amazingly well, and she has some pretty cool varieties. I was introduced to Paul Robeson's and Kellogg's and Black Beauties by her. The other company I buy all my seeds from is called Incredible Seed Company. So right here I've got my green zebras from them. They're an awesome Canadian company. They're out in Nova Scotia, and every seed that I have other than from Ricky or Great West Seeds, Incredible Seeds, and then another local company that I will grab from is Gaia Seeds right here. They did the Chinese lanterns that I'm going to be doing. So some things like beans, I'm going to direct sow in the garden, so I'm not going to worry about starting them here. What I'm going to be starting in here is going to be my tomatoes, my herbs, more tomatoes, squash, and I'm going to try some melons this year. I've been told by many people in the area melons are not happy, but at the same time, my neighbor down the road was overrun with boring squash beetles, and I had none last year, so we're going to give it a try. Planting in these, I'm not going to worry about putting multiple ones in there because realistically I'd like each one of these plants to get strong and happy, get their roots nice and tight in there, so when you go and grab the plant, you know they're good to up pot when you grab the little plant and the whole little pod comes up with it. You want to make sure that you kind of catch this as soon as possible when it's all tightly knit, and it's not that they're basically the roots become like intertwined to a point that it's so tight you can't pull them apart or anything like that. Then you've stunted the growth of the plant. So I've got one in each because I'm hoping basically I can keep them in these as long as possible before having to up pot because of my space. And then from these I'll go to bigger pots. Now what I'm going to do is each row across here, I'm going to basically go through the rainbow. I've got my yellow Brandywine, some orange Paul Robeson's, pink Brandywines, red Kellogg's, early Siberians, which are red, green zebras, and black beauties. So each of these will get a row, as well as I'll also get my cherry tomatoes in here. So I'm going to have sunrise bumblebees, berry blues, this German, well, I think it's a German name, Lundkampf, kind of little orange tomatoes, and this random hybrid tomato that doesn't technically really exist anywhere, but my cousin had them grow so full of tomatoes and take over her garden. I'm just going to try them and see what happens to these mystery Connerty Meadow Farms tomatoes. Okay, now that we've got a seed in each cell, we're going to go back to our seed starting soil, and we're going to just put a thin layer on top, so just to kind of cover the seeds. You kind of just want to cover them without rubbing too hard, because obviously you don't want to disturb the seeds that you just stuck in each cell. Okay, now that we've kind of got that, I'm going to very gently move everything around. You're going to grab one of the other trays, ta-da, kind of neatly line it up. And these are thin plastic, so you don't want to press really hard to crush them, but you're just going to kind of give it a nice little pack down there. And once you add water, it's going to settle a little bit more. Now, if you wanted to go with the vermiculite, this would be the time that you would go ahead and sprinkle that. Just put a thin layer on top, and that will help control the moisture. I've just got that USB fan. So the last thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I've got my Sharpie and my tags, and I'm just going to go ahead and label each row of, I've got my various tomatoes and my 2 types of flowers across the bottom. And you're going to go ahead and do that for all the trays you want and all the items you want. And once your trays are good to go, take you inside to the greenhouse and show you my setup down there. All labeled up. Okay, so we've got the seeds in their little trays. This is my little greenhouse. It's a pretty standard one you can get from like PV Mart or Home Depot. It's got the plastic coating on it with a little door. So to give you a look inside here, see if I can do this with one hand. Up and over. So we've got our 4 layers of trays all labeled and ready to go. So what I do is I have them all on their layers. I have my hot peppers on the heat pads on the bottom. You can see they are coming up. I had actually started these a little while ago, so that's pretty exciting. Oh, I might actually have some cherry bombs coming up now too. Got 1 lilac, 1 shishito. Oh, maybe 2 lilacs. Some cayenne peppers. At least got 3 jalapenos maybe. Looking good. So with the trays, I make sure that one of these little guys was cut out so I can lift him up. And then I will fill that with water when I need. So right now you can see there's still water in there. They're still pretty heavy, so I'm not going to worry about watering that one. That one's also still got water in it. The one I usually worry about the most, oh, so that one I'll add some water in the bottom, will be the hot pepper one because it's on the hot tray. So it'll usually dry out the water the most. But lifting that up and feeling it, that soil's actually pretty wet, so I'm not going to worry about watering them today. Now for the setup, if you're hearing a hum, that is my little USB fan. You can see that I've got hooked up here. It's not actually blowing on any of the plants, it's just blowing down in the front. I have the seeds pushed all the way back. And then there's a small little hole, I don't know if you can see in the corner here, where the cable comes out and down into the USB connector. And you'll also notice I've got all this reflective material in it. So this is an emergency blanket from the dollar store. The reason I do that is it, 1, helps with insulation, 2, it helps reflect light. So if you have it in a window and you have sun coming in, it helps the light bounce around in there. It was a tip that my cousin Ricky gave me. However, I'm also using it this time because these lights here, my grow lights, I've only got 4 grow lights, and there's 4 rows, and they used to have these on the side, so it helps reflect and direct the light. So I'd actually need like 3 lights to come across here, because with those on, it just directs the light into a very small strip. So I removed those from all 4 of those lights. And with the emergency blankets, basically the entire greenhouse is a giant light reflector. So the emergency blanket is reflecting the light from this back in. So, I mean, this middle section still will get the most light, but it's all being reflected back. So when I had the strips on, you'd see that clearly one area was getting lit and the others were shaded. Now, without that, it's much better. So everything is a lot more evenly lit. And so once I packed them down and I put some water in them, spritzed them down, now it's just a matter of keeping an eye on them, making sure they don't dry out, especially making sure they don't dry out once they start growing, because that can either stunt the growth if they do survive or just kill them off right away. And again, I like the bottom watering just because I've always had the problem with when I'm top watering getting mold and problems on the top, which again, you can help control that with vermiculite, but I'm trying to save as much money as possible. And I like the bottom watering because again, the roots will reach down to get to the water because it's coming from the bottom up, so you'll get a nice root system going down as opposed to the water sitting on the top part of the thing. So you can easily water the seeds from the top, give them a good heavy water, and have the water come out the bottom, like make sure there's drain holes in it and the water, excess water will drain out. I've just found this is a lot easier for me to manage, especially with my ADHD. Sometimes I will forget to water them for like 2 days. So by having the water in the bottom, they'll just kind of soak it up as they need it. So if I forget to check on them for 1 day, they'll usually be fine. But yeah, that is our setup. Like I said, we got a couple babies down here. And that's those babies are a couple weeks old now. But we'll see how things go. And that is how But that, ladies and gentlemen, is how I do my